Thank you again, everyone. Hello, my name is Geraldine Weiser, and I'm the Director of Business Development here at Corporate College. I want to wish all of you a very good afternoon, and thank you for joining Corporate College's webinar series, Live with the Experts. As always, we look forward to providing really relevant information, things that you can use today, the tools and topics that are most important to you, and really set you up for success. Adjusting to this new norm seems to be a daily occurrence, and it's probably going to be a daily occurrence for a little while. And we're all shifting to this new reality of remote working and learning and living. And during this time, Tri-C is more than ever committed to serving you during this rapid time of change by providing real actionable resources to help not only you, but help your team during this time. And it doesn't matter wherever you're located, whether you're still at the work site or if you're working remotely. Our series is just one of the newest resources that we have to help prepare the workforce to achieve both personal and business goals. And it's comprised of like 4 primary topics, with the one for today's session being working remotely. We have others focused on virtual leadership, navigating a transition, and also personal health and well-being. And as many of you already know, Corporate College has just a terrific talent bench of facilitators and subject matter experts. Today's no different. We are so excited to present to you Tamsin Astor. Tamsin is the founder and chief habit scientist of Yoga Brained Coaching. She is known for giving her clients the tools to shift their mindset, organize their vision, and improve their habits to create an efficient, productive business. Uh, we alone make over 35,000 decisions every single day, which leads to decision fatigue.
Mhm.
Dr. Astor is here to help us with that. Her clients reduce the amount of overwhelming decision making they do by harnessing their goal achieving machine, also known as their brains. And that increases time and energy for fun, right? Right, Tamsin? That's the important thing. So,
Absolutely.
right. But prior to coaching, Dr. Astor was an academic and then a consultant using yoga and meditation to support children and therapists and teachers and students and so many people, um, many also with ADHD and in the autism spectrum and struggling in inner city school districts. So she understands really how to apply this to a broad range of people. Tamsin Astor holds a PhD in neuroscience and psychology and a postdoctorate in education, plus multiple certifications in both mindset and holistic health practices. She's also an executive coach and author of the book Force of Habit: Unleash Your Power by Developing Great Habits. I need those great habits. Yes, I like that. I like that, Tamsin. And thank you again, Tamsin. We are obviously so pleased to have you not only as part of our corporate college team, but also here today talking to so many folks here in Northeast Ohio. Thank you for joining us, Tamsin.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure to be here. And, the upside of these crazy times is look at us being able to deliver it from the comfort of our own homes, right?
Right.
With or without pants, too, It's exciting.
Well, it's anybody's guess, right? So, well, thank you. And I know we're very excited. I know I'm personally excited to hear about this particular topic today because I know I'm going to be taking lots of notes.
All right. So, shall I take it away?
Please go right ahead.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. So, hi again. My name's Tamsin Astor, and I'm super excited to be here. What I will share with you today is a general overview in how to think about working from home. And part of that is really understanding your roles and then maintaining the right habits to support those roles. Can I have the next slide? There we go. So we've had a lovely introduction before, but just to remind you, I help people exponentially improve their productivity by teaching them a few key habit shifts. So you have time for what you want, time for what you need, and time for fun, right? Because that's what it's all about in my view. And what I teach is so powerful that the business owners, the executives, the entrepreneurs and parents that I've worked with demonstrate massive shifts in their personal and professional lives. Slide. Thank you. So today we're going to look at what the current situation is And I'm going to divide it into BC, before Corona, and then during Corona, so that we can really understand what was not working before and what has been highlighted during this time, and then what we can learn from that as we move forward. We're also going to look at our roles, because most of us embody multiple roles, which is what often causes a situation of overwhelm, because each of these roles has a whole load of rules and boundaries and transitions, and us women particularly are very good at, but actually it's not really great for us in the long term, of multitasking. Right? I know you can all feel me with that one. I'm a mother of 3 kids, and I'm divorced, so yeah, I know what that piece is like. And then we're also going to look at the key habits to really manage if we want to be successful. Can I have the next slide, please, Geraldine? Thank you. So when we look at this, what I really want to dive into is some of the statistics that we have really been kind of trying to really understand, and what it means for us as workers, as mothers, as fathers, as employers, as employees, and then look at, what we can learn from that. Because one of the things that I do that is really unique is that I combine the East and the West. And I think one of the things we know from habit science is that it's really easy to fall into habits because our brains are brilliant and they create automation. But that means then that we stop paying attention and we stop really noticing what is working, what is not working, what is serving us, what is not serving us. So one of the first things I really like to do is look at the data so that we can really understand what is happening, what's working, what's not working, so that we then can make changes based on actual data rather than what we think is going on. Make sense? All right, so before Corona, about 43% of Americans worked from home, some of the time or part of the time, according to a study by Gallup. One of the biggest issues, though, was that women had a double shift. And what I mean by that is that they're working a full day and they're also working a full day at home. This also causes huge health implications for men and for women. So I know that some people before Corona were struggling, right? And that's why I'm able to do the work I am, because people need support and need help. And that's why I do this work. Corona, though, is highlighting what didn't work. And I think the big thing that we want to think about is, are you willing to look at this and make the change? And I am arguing, let's do this. Let's see what's working, what's not working, and make the change. So let me tell you a little bit about Janet. She was one of those women who, before Corona, can you go back one slide, please, Geraldine? Thank you. So before Corona, Janet was one of those women who was struggling. After an event, she ran up to me and she looked down at me, which I can tell you was an interesting experience because I'm 5'10" and I was wearing heels. So she looked down at me and she said, "Tamsin, I need you in my life. I have no time and I've hired employees to reduce my workload, to reduce my stress, to make more time for myself, but actually I'm working more, not less. I have less time for my partner, less time for my hobbies, less time with my pets, and I'm feeling completely overwhelmed and stressed." So what I did was I led her through my unique system, which I'm going to highlight a little bit of today, where we audited her habits, we audited her vision, we audited her mindset. And fast forward a few months, after going through my unique system, she'd learned to clearly delegate and had been able to totally release the "don't worry, I'll just do it all, I'll just manage it all" mentality. And the upside of this was that she described with absolute pleasure how she was able to enjoy morning coffee every day with her partner, not just at the weekends. And that she had a whole load more time at the weekends to do her hobbies and to volunteer and do the things that really, really stirred her soul. So before Corona, some of us were struggling with this. After Corona, it's just gotten a little bit more difficult. When I talk about the health implications, one of the things I want you to really be aware of is that when a woman marries, her workload doubles and a man's workload decreases by 20 hours a week. Interestingly, studies done by the Gottman Foundation that looks at relationships, John Gottman, found that if women are unhappy with the amount of dishes they do, then her marriage is more likely to be under pressure and possibly may not survive. Which was interesting for me to read that study in the New York Times recently, because I'm divorced as of 6 years. And for the last few years of my marriage, I complained a lot about the amount of dishes I was doing. Interestingly, in homes where there are gay couples and lesbian couples, you actually find that there's more of a balance, because that those gender roles are less entrenched, right? We also want to be really aware of the fact that there are health implications. So the Lancet, which is a huge respected medical journal, did a study of 600,000 men and women and found that if you work 55 hours a week or more, you have a 33%, that's a 1 in 3 chance of increasing the chance of having a stroke and an increase in coronary heart disease. And what we find is that once you start getting up to 49, 50 hours a week of working, your mental health is massively impacted. And this is even more of an issue for women. And interestingly, the United States and Papua New Guinea are the only 2 countries in the entire world that do not guarantee paid maternity leave. Right? The United States and Papua New Guinea are the only 2 countries in the whole world that don't guarantee paid maternity leave. So this is an issue, right? Partly this is a sociological issue, because when women rise up and take on more senior positions in government and organizations, it's seen as a rise. Whereas when men take on more housework, it's seen as a social demotion, right? Because there's still that issue of identity being tied to that. And of course, there are countries where there is huge success there, where it's regulated, right, by law that men get paternity leave and so on. But I just wanted to frame that before Corona, there were health impacts, there were sociological impacts, there were relationship impacts, there was stress. There's a lot of stuff going on BC. All right, can I have the next slide, please, Geraldine? All right, so during Corona, this was a recent study released by John Wiley, who run the DISC study, DISC test, which I'm sure many of you have done. And looking at what is going on right now. Right now, 45% of us are just tired of being at home. We're just done. We're like, get me out of here, right? 37% of us are really struggling with balancing the home, personal, work, life balance, right? I mean, and is there really anything that we can do about balance? And what does that mean? And then, of course, there are issues of isolation and having a workspace. And have we created a space that is good and safe and productive and healthy, right? We're not putting our computer, laptops, and keyboards at the wrong angles that will hurt our wrists and our backs. Technical issues. I remember the first week trying to teach my 9-year-old daughter about Google Classrooms and Hangouts and Zoom. Communication, because interestingly, only about 7% of communication is actually the written word. The rest is tone and body language. So if I was sitting here today sharing this information with you in this kind of tone, you might not find it as engaging. And I'm sure you're all sitting up here listening with full joy and excitement and engagement right now and not multitasking. Right? So right now we are looking at what's going on. And so today I really want to tackle the balance piece when we look at the roles. Okay. Next slide, please. So there was a study recently released by leanin.org who looked at this issue of the double shift and how women now during Corona are actually doing a double shift, right? So what that means is that women are working about 171 hours a week, which is insane, right? They are working a full-time job, then they are working the home, which is another, 80 to 90 hours a week. And then they're teaching their kids and then they're taking care of. So it's basically women have more work to do than they can possibly fit in their time. However, men have 20 fewer hours of labor every week. And this is still going on according to this study right now. And of course, women of color and single mothers are stressed even more. They have much greater demands placed on them. The study also looked at the physical, psychological, emotional aspects of stress. And when we get into high levels of stress, you start to get physical symptoms, right? Like racing heartbeat, disturbed sleep. I've been doing a lot of webinars on sleep because that's a huge issue. And what we're finding right now is that 1 in 4 women, in comparison to 1 in 10 men, are experiencing severe anxiety. 31% of women compared to 13% of men with full-time jobs and families have more work than they can possibly fit in. And some employees are doing something. 40% have said that they've increased their flexibility, but less than 20% have said that they've rejiggered their priorities or narrowed the scope of work. Now, I'm not trying to make this out as a like masculine, feminine, woo, like the women are being downplayed here. Every one of you men listening has women in your life. Your mother, your sisters, your employees, your employer, your daughters, right? So this is just the data, right? And I'm not trying to make a case of, pro and anti here. I just want you all to be aware of the data so that the women, if you are a man, that you understand the pressure that the women in your life are currently dealing with. So that's the situation, DC, during Corona. So what can we do to make a shift here? Because I know I've presented you with a whole load of kind of this is the kind of stuff that can feel heavy, right? And if you do feel the weight of that data on you, remember that emotion is energy in motion. And one of the best ways to shift that and make a change in that is to move, right? Move your body. So get up and dance, go for a run around the block, do some yoga, just shake it off. And that will really help. I mean, there's obviously lots of other techniques I use and that I'm sure you're all aware of, but that's one of the best, quickest way of shifting that. All right, can we go to the next slide, please, Geraldine? All right, so let's look at roles, right? So when you start to look at this, and this is something that I often do with my clients, just to get them to really start thinking about this. Many of us take on multiple roles. We're a leader, we're a parent, we're a partner, we're an employee, we're an employer. We're also a short order chef, a laundry master, a bill payer, a dog food manager, fill in the blank, a odd sock pairer, right? And you look at your home and your business and your life, how many different roles you take on. The question is, do you know what you need in each of these roles? Do you know what those you support in all of these different roles need? Do you know what your team needs? And your kids, your parents, all the people in your life, right? So one of the things that I want you to look at here is to really start zoning in on these different roles. So what I would love for you to do is grab a piece of paper right now, and I'm going to get you a little activity because I'm a big fan of not just talking at you. I want you to hear me. I want you to take in what I'm saying so that you can put this stuff to good use. You with me? Yep. Woo! All right, so grab yourself a notebook, piece of paper, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes now to write out every single role that you are currently doing in your business, in your home, in everything, whether it's doing the Instacart order, checking the tires of the car, maintaining the outside of your house, paying the bills, making sure the house is clean, planning the meals, checking the emails, looking after yourself. Look at all those different roles and just dump them all onto a piece of paper and make a list for me now. Go. If you've just joined, we're all creating a list of all the roles we take on in our lives and that we're managing currently right now. So write down every single role that you are currently navigating, whether it's toilet paper manager, dog walker, dishwasher emptier, bill payer. Think about everything you're doing in your life right now. work, for business, all the things that you are managing. Just get as many of them out on paper as you possibly can. All right, as you start to wrap this up, we're now going to analyze this list. So I've called this the LTD activity. So what you're going to do now is go through your list, and next to each role that you've written down, you're going to write an L if you just love it. You're going to write a T if you tolerate it, and you're going to write a D if you really dislike this role. So go through that list now and write an L if you love it, a T if you tolerate it, and a D if you dislike it. So I want you now to start analyzing your data. Do you love it? Do you tolerate it? Or do you dislike it? And then when you've gone through that list of love, tolerate, dislike, I want you to write down the numbers. So you've got L equals, T equals, D equals. And if you're really quick off the bat with your math, you could even do a percentage. So you've got some great statistics there. Now, I don't know if anybody is interested in sharing, but the point of this is to evaluate your life, and you can do it in different sections of your life. You can do it for just your home, you can do it just for one room, you can do it for just the particular parts of one part of your business. You can do it in a relationship, you can do it for all these different things, right? You could do it for a room in your house, right? So what this does is it just gets you to start that kind of internal reflection about the things that you are having to navigate on a regular basis, and then your feelings about it. So if anybody is interested in sharing and would like to have a little conversation about that, you can present it in the chat right now, and Geraldine can share it with me too. If anybody would like to say, wow, I spend 90% of my life doing things that I tolerate and only 10% of my life doing things I love and nothing I dislike, right? So the point of this is to start seeing what's working for you and what's not, so that you can then make a change. You guys with me? This, if I was on Zoom, I'd be like, give me some thumbs up. Do you feel me? Here's some love. I'm going to send you guys some love, because I know when I first did this, I was a little bit shocked by the statistics. And I know it's not exactly right if you want to get fully pedantic, which my ex-husband as a neuroscientist philosopher would do. Because of course, you know, some of these roles are you're only going to be doing for 5 minutes a day, and others you're going to be doing for hours a day. But the point is to give you a rough measure of how much of your life are you spending doing things that you tolerate and dislike versus how much of your life are you doing things that you love. And during Corona, what you might have found is that there's been a shift. So, for example, one of the things that I love about having my kids around during the day is I love these random conversations that we have in the kitchen when we're grabbing food during the middle of the day. I have 2 teenage sons and a daughter. And, you know, we'll bump into each other, you know, microwaving food, grabbing salads, making coffee, and we'll have these just 5 or 10 or 15-minute conversations that didn't happen during a regular school day. And that to me is precious, right? And it makes me think, how can I structure my time with them so that we get more of that, for example? All right, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change. I'm going to have to continue doing them. Okay. I believe 90% doing my things I love. Yes, Dwayne, 65% dislike. I have more tea in my rolls. Okay, let me see what else I'm getting here. Okay, so not understanding how this is going to change. All right, Kellyanne, I'm going to tell you the next bit. So once you've revealed this, there's two approaches that you have to making the changes in the tolerate and the dislike. One is that you delegate or delete these roles. Do you have to do these roles? So for example, okay, I apologize. I didn't realize that you wanted to be anonymous. I'm sorry. So if you want to delete or delegate these roles, what could you do? Could you hire them out to somebody else? Could you find somebody else in your family to do them? Could you have a conversation with your boss about doing something differently? So for example, when I got divorced and I had to rebudget, one of the things I decided to do was that I would mow my lawn because I like mowing my lawn, whereas I don't like vacuuming my house, right? Obviously, I'm having to vacuum my house right now. But that's something that we want to navigate, right? And we want to look at, and we have the power to change. If it's something that is a mindset thing that you actually can't get rid of, you have to change your mental habits around it. So, for example, I had a client who was a dean at a local big university on the East Coast. And she found the morning routine really stressful because she did not like getting dressed, because she found the whole thing of making sure that she had the right clothes really stressful. And her bathroom was really, really cold. She lived in a drafty old house on the East Coast. So obviously you can't delegate your morning routine in terms of getting dressed to somebody else. So that was something that we had to do a mindset shift around. Okay. So what she did was she went to Nordstrom and she worked with a personal shopper, which is apparently free. I did not know. And the personal shopper helped her pick out a whole load of outfits that fitted her body type, that made her feel comfortable, made her feel like a fabulous leader. And she then could plan that out and didn't have to spend 20 minutes every morning looking in her closet going, I don't know what to wear, right? So what you want to look at is, if you have the power to change it, do. If you don't, then you have to do a mindset shift around it and change it in your own personal life. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you, Geraldine. So when we start breaking this down and looking at our habits, why do we care about habits? Well, 90% of our self-care behavior is habit. 56% of our daily actions are habits. And over half of what we do every day at work, it's about 50-55, depending on the studies you look at, are habits. So the way that we structure our lives are really, really important, because habits dominate so much of how we show up. Have the next slide, please, Geraldine. So what is a habit? A habit is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. Habits make up routines, and during this time of uncertainty, routines are incredibly stabilizing. Because uncertainty, which is what a lot of us are dealing with right now, is totally disruptive to the nervous system. But what I want you to do is look at that title and look at that description. A habit is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. So inherent in the definition of a habit is that it is hard to give up. It is hard to change. It is hard to shift. And what I want you to do is start looking at this in a different way. Habits, yes, once they're ingrained, they are hard to give up. And depending on how you look at them, you can think about it as a fixed. If you are stuck in that fixed mindset around habits, you will find it hard to change. And in the ancient yogic texts, they describe habits as grooves in your brain created by the cart that's dragged by the ox through your brain, right? In modern neuroscience terms, we would talk about the myelination, the installation that builds up the more you do something repeatedly, right? The more you do it. And the example would be when you're driving a car. When you first start learning how to drive a car, you get into the car, you do the seatbelt, you adjust the mirrors, you do all of those different stages, right? And the processes that you go through, you have to actively engage in. But you get to a point when you've driven somewhere and you don't even think about it. You don't even recall the route you've taken because it's become automated. So what I want you to think about is that power that we have in our brains, you can harness that for good. You can harness that for creating habits that serve you so that you can reduce some of those decisions you make, which Geraldine said at the beginning, right? We make about 35,000 decisions every day, which is what leads us to massive overwhelm. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is where I'm going to dive a little bit into the anatomy of a habit. A habit is not just one thing. It's not just a behavior. A habit is made up of 3 different things: the cue, the action, and the reward. So I want you to write this down. The cue, the action, and the reward. So the cue is the thing that triggers the habit cycle. This is the time, the person, the place, the emotion, the preceding event. The cue is the thing that triggers the habit behavior. The action is the actual habit itself, the actual behavior. And the reward is what you get out of it. And that reward is the thing that will reaffirm and deepen the cue because it makes you feel good, right? That's what the reward cycle is. Make sense? Okay. I go to the next slide, please, Geraldine. So this is where the anatomy comes in terms of the brain, right? So you can see here this beautiful picture of the human brain. On the left-hand side, you can see the frontal and prefrontal cortex. And then you've got the cerebellum, which is that big kind of almond-shaped thing at the base of the brain on the bottom right, and then spinal cord. So when we look at habits and why habits are hard to change, I want to look at those 2 arrows. So on the left, you'll see there's an arrow going to the prefrontal cortex, which says cue and reward. So the frontal cortex is where the cue and the reward are located. The action, the actual behavior itself, is embedded more deeply in the brain, the basal ganglia, that sort of oval shape, right, which is just sort of behind and above the ears. What that means is that the actual action is really hard to access because the way the brain developed up and forward, right? It developed up the nervous system. So when you think about less evolved animals, right, that just have a nervous system but don't have all of the frontal cortex, right? Brain developed up and out. So almost like some people describe it as a ice cream cone with 3 scoops. The prefrontal cortex, the frontal cortex and the bit in front of it, the prefrontal cortex, is the most evolved part, which means that we have most access to that. So if we want to change our habits, we need to look at the cues and the rewards, not at the actual behavior itself, not at the actual habit itself, not at the actual action. And that's where a lot of us get stuck when we try to change our actions. We look at the things going on in our lives, we recognize that we need to change our habits, but we just try to change the action. We just try to change the habit. We just try to change the behavior, but we're not looking at the bits that surround it. We're not looking at what is cueing the behavior, and we're not looking at what is the reward for the behavior. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? No, no questions so far. Okay, so what that means is that when we want to take control of our lives and change our habits, we want to look at the cue and the reward. So for example, if you are struggling with eating, for example, and you are snacking, you want to look at what are the cues that is triggering that. Is it having a bad day? Is that a cue? Is it walking into the kitchen? Is it a place that's cueing it? Is it being around particular people? Is it a time of the day, right? And then what is it making me feel? So when you start looking at the cue and the reward and start to think about changing those and activating those and using your willpower to change those bits rather than the habit itself, it's going to make it much easier. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so now we're going to look at the habits for these different roles. So when we look at the different roles we have, One of the things that it becomes really difficult, particularly while we're working from home, is the issue of boundaries, right? So, do we have a physical boundary around our workspace? Do we have a time boundary around what time of day we're going to be logging in, what time of day we're willing to check our emails or have to check our emails or show up for virtual meetings? And are we putting boundaries around the amount of energy that we're expending in these different roles? The second thing we're going to look at is transitions, how we move between these different roles. And the third thing is, are we really creating enough breaks in our day to make this doable and sustainable in the long term? So when we look at boundaries, we want to be really mindful of how we are navigating those, because they can lead to huge frustration, huge irritation, and when we don't set up clear expectations, it can make things much harder. So one of the big tips for working from home is to make a very specific, clear boundary around your workspace. So if you don't have a prescribed workspace in office at home and you're working, in the corner of the bedroom or from the dining room table or whatever, you want to really create a boundary around, this is the time of day that I'm doing the work, right? So I'm not eating at the same time. I'm not trying to tidy up or unload the dishwasher at the same time. I'm not fill in the blank, right? I'm here, I'm working, and I'm doing that. Because when we get into that multitasking thing, we think we're being more efficient, but what we're actually doing is we're jumping back and forward between the multiple roles. And only 2% of the population can actually multitask. What we're doing is massively reducing our inefficiency and increasing the amount of time it takes to do something by switching our focus back and forward and back and forward and back and forward. And it's a real issue in terms of long-term productivity, because what we've found is that the amount of time it takes is to get back into something when you've been distracted out of it is up to 25 minutes. So the average worker in an office gets interrupted every 3 to 10 minutes. And it takes us 5 to 25 minutes to refocus. So this is incredibly inefficient. The other thing we have to be aware of is that 44% of the interruptions are self-inflicted because we are trying to keep ourselves safe. And one of the things that's really, really clear here is that the research, even on the most elite athletes, writers, and people who have and do work that requires extreme focus and concentration, studies on these elites show that we're only productive, or they are only productive, for 5 to 6 hours a day. So when we think about creating boundaries around our workday, boundaries around our physical space, boundaries around our time, boundaries around our energy, we need to be aware of what we actually are able to do and where we are pushing ourselves to a place that is not sustainable, where we are pushing ourselves and expecting those around us to work harder, do more than actually is possible. And again, the research shows that when we work more than 55 hours a week, our productivity drops. We are actually not more efficient. We are less efficient because we're running on empty. So that's the first thing I want you to be really mindful of with your boundaries is, have you created a physical space that is delineated for work and that you're not trying to do a million other things? Are you creating times of the day that work around that? And are you being very clear about turning off your texts, turning off your phones, putting on noise cancelling headphones, communicating with the people you live with that, this is something that I'm going to be committed to doing right now, and it would make things much easier if you would not disturb me. And I know, of course, it's not possible if you've got young children, unless you are willing to look at your day and perhaps figure out a time of day when they're asleep or they're engaged in other things, right? So making some effort to look at what is working and what is not and creating some boundaries around that is really, really important. Make sense? Anybody have any questions about boundaries? No? Okay. All right, so now we're going to look at transition. So again, it's really important to create some energy around. Can you go back one slide, Geraldine? We're still going to go through it. Thank you. So when we look at transitions, when we move between these different roles, we want to create a transition routine that sends a message to our brain, to our minds, that we are moving from one thing to another. So for example, if your day used to be before Corona, you'd get up, you'd make some coffee and you'd drive to work and you'd listen to, you know, NPR, or you'd listen to an audiobook or whatever on that drive. And then you get to office, and that drive was part of your transition where you were leaving home and moving into that workspace. Create a transition routine that makes sense for you now. So for example, get up, get dressed, walk around the block, and then go to your office. Right? Create some kind of transition that makes sense for you. When you finish working, close your laptop, put it aside. If it's a desktop, put a shawl or a towel or something over it. Obviously, you don't want to create a fire risk, but do something that indicates this is a transition. I'm moving from one role to another, particularly when they're big, significant, time and energy engaging roles, right? So that you are clearly ending one and starting another, because that will stop you from showing up the roles that are important to you in a state of overwhelm, in a state of multitasking, in a state of anxiety, because you are still stuck in that other role. Does that make sense? Yeah. So really look again at those different roles you have and think about how you can create transition routines between them, because that's to allow you to be more successful and allow you to be present in the roles that are really important for you. The third piece is to look at break, right? And again, one of the things that a lot of my clients have reported to me is that they feel like they have to work harder and be online more during Corona because they don't have that physical presence of quote unquote being watched in the office. What that means is that we're often working harder and longer and not being efficient. Again, looking at the research on focus and productivity, the average person focuses for about 52 minutes max, and then their focus drops. So I want you to write this down. Take out your pen and paper and write down 52 minutes. And then we actually do best when we have about 15 minutes break. So, you know, for all intents and purposes, to make it easier, you could work for 50 minutes and then take 10 minutes off or so. But that's really where you're going to find the biggest productivity. When you push yourself through by consuming coffee, sugar, just powering through it, the actual work you're doing is going to reduce in productivity. Right? And long term, as you learned at the beginning, is more likely to cause huge issues in your mental health, and it's going to cause huge issues in your physical health, right? We're looking at stroke and coronary heart disease. And currently during Corona, look at the statistics. A huge number of people are in a state of massive anxiety and overwhelm. This is not sustainable for the planet. This is not sustainable for people who are trying to raise children and change the world and the businesses they run, right? So creating healthy breaks is really important. And that could be something that you can learn from Corona, right? Is that working from home and not having to deal with that commute means that you are potentially saving an hour or 2 hours every day, which you can then create space during your day to have more breaks, to, you know, recharge and refocus and still be incredibly productive. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so to really be hugely successful at this time, there are three things I want you to really look at when we think about success. The bookend, which I sort of touched on a little bit with the, you know, driving to work being replaced by a walk around the block, is what you do have control over is when your day starts and when your day ends. When your day starts and when your day ends, you have control over that. So make it work for you. Do the things that are grounding. Do the things that fill your cup. And wherever possible, do things that are for you and not just reacting to others. I know what it's like to be in a position where I just served others. When one of my children had cancer, I was in a place of just serving him and his older brother and my then husband, because those things were obviously incredibly physically, psychologically, and emotionally demanding of me. But I forgot to put myself first. And when you don't put yourself first, you struggle. So one of the things that I learned during that period was that I had to start the day on my terms. And that meant that I had to wake up before everybody else so that I could create a morning routine that did not involve me serving others, serving the needs of my children, serving the needs of my husband, serving the needs of my dog, everything else, my clients. It was just me taking charge of myself and filling my cup starting the day, right? So I want you to think about your morning routine and the end of your day routine so that you can create that support and structure. And when we look at the people who are the most successful in the world, you know, the Oprahs and the Richard Bransons of the world, the ones who really changed the world, they're the ones who have a lot of these really key habits in place. The second kind of structure of habits, set of habits, are the daily habits that you do. The ones that are really going to keep you on track, the ones that will support and nourish and sustain you in the long term, are the things that you do every day. The first is sleep. You have to get on top of your sleep if you're going to do well, because when you're in a state of reduced sleep, when you are in a state with a lack of focus on sleep that is nourishing, not just that you're getting 7 or 8 hours of sleep, that the sleep is sleep that you can arise from without feeling the need to drink, you know, a pot of coffee, right? You're going to feel better. You're going to do better. Lack of sleep causes huge issues. 50 to 70 million Americans are currently taking prescriptions for sleep. About half of all Americans fall asleep unintentionally every day. This is pre-corona data. 46 to 49% of Americans in the 18 to 65 age range are falling asleep unintentionally. What that means is they could be driving a school bus, they could be operating machinery that, you know, determines how like the concentration of a drug. They could be, you know, making decisions that affect our bodies and our freedom. This is huge. Sleep deprivation also causes buildup of weight around the midsection, reduces your sex drive, ages your skin, that has so many ripple on negative effects, makes you behave as if you're drunk because of the way it impacts your ability to function, massively impacts your memory. So the first daily habit I really want you to prioritize is sleep. Second is eating. Again, it's really hard to function well if you are consuming huge amounts of sugar, huge amounts of caffeine, huge amounts of alcohol, huge amounts of processed food. You guys all know this. This isn't rocket science, but again, the data is compelling. And if you take charge of this, you will feel so much better. And if you feel better, everybody around you feels better, right? It's that ripple out effect. So the biggest tip for eating is make sure that you eat your biggest meal in the middle of the day. And that's one of the huge upsides of Corona, is that when we're working from home, we have more freedom about when we can eat and how we can eat. And I mean, and you know, I'm in Cleveland, and I can currently mostly get most things in the grocery store through Instacart. You know, and I know that really depends on where you are in the world, how much access you can get to the fresh fruits and vegetables and so on. But eating your biggest meal in the middle of the day, when your bile is at the highest, when you've got gravity working on your side, when you've got, you know, another 8 or 9 hours to digest the food, that's going to serve you better. If you eat a huge meal at the end of the day, the energy and attention in your digestive tract is going to go towards digesting the food rather than all the other things that our body and mind is designed to do during sleep, which is not to digest food. So sleep, eat. The third is exercise. Really take some time to prioritize exercise every single day. Our bodies are designed to move, and we force ourselves to sit in cars and behind computers for an incredibly long and extended periods of the day, which does not serve us well. And again, when we start sitting for extended periods of time, we have huge impacts on the way our system works, right? It's all connected, the mind and body. On a fun and amusing level, the longer you sit and the more you sit, the bigger your backside gets because the buttocks tissue actually breaks down and spreads. So that's a funny one that might motivate you to get up every now and again. But also your liver stops functioning well when you're static for too long, right? Your hips start to tighten, which can give you back pain. So there's a whole load of ripple-on effects from a lack of exercise. Also, when we exercise well, we digest our food more efficiently. When we exercise well, we sleep more efficiently. When we exercise well, we have a boost in endorphin, which makes us feel better, right? So again, this is really huge. And currently, according to the CDC, I think it's less than 20% of Americans are getting the recommended daily amount of exercise. And again, one of the upsides of not commuting is having that extra time back that you can take to go for a walk with your family, get on a bike, look at a YouTube video, get a hip video, download an app. I mean, what can you imagine if we were going through this in 1994 with dial-up and no apps? I mean, it would be a very different situation. No Zoom, not being able to connect with people. So yes, this is an awful situation, but I'm always about looking for the silver lining. So those are the 3 daily habits I really, really want you to prioritize. Are you sleeping well? Are you eating healthy food? And are you exercising daily, moving your body daily? The third habit for success is your mind, your mindset, your mental habits. If you are not on top of your mental habits, it's really, really, really hard to do well. Mindset is really, really key for long-term health and well-being and productivity. It's really, really vital to understand what mindset is and how much it controls everything. So mindset is something that if you're on social media, you'll have seen a lot of hashtags, a lot of work around, hashtag mindset is everything. But do you know what mindset is? Right? Mindset is a collection of thoughts and beliefs that create your attitude, that create your habits and your disposition, and will modulate how you respond to and interpret events. Let me say that again. Your mindset is a collection of thoughts and beliefs that create your attitude, create your habits and your disposition, and modulates how you respond to and interpret events. The mindset is huge in terms of how you show up, how you behave, how you feel, how you react to those around you. And it comes from a number of places. It comes from your childhood. It comes from your experiences, the things that you've gone through. It comes from your culture, from your society, from your gender, from your religion, right? So mindset comes from a lot of different places. The point is, what do you want to do with it? Do you sit with the idea that we have a fixed mindset and that you cannot change and you cannot do anything about it? My mother used to call that the kind of the Eeyore. If you ever watched Winnie the Pooh, that kind of, right? It's often called a sort of facet of it. It's often called learned helplessness. I do not have any control. What I do will not affect my situation, right? Or are you willing to take on a growth mindset, right? Which is like the Tigger in Winnie the Pooh, right? I have the power to change. Optimism is something that you can learn. We can train ourselves to be optimistic. I have the power to change, right? So we get stuck in this loop, but we have the power to get out of it and take charge. And that's really what I want you to leave you with, is that all of this stuff that I've told you about is I've given you a lens to look through, right? We have this data out there. We can gather the data on ourselves. What am I doing on a regular basis that I love? What am I doing on a regular basis that I tolerate? What am I doing on a regular basis that I dislike or perhaps even hate? What can I then do with that? Do I have to be doing these things? Can I delegate them? Can I delete them? Can I give them to somebody else to manage? Or do I need to change my relationship with this thing because it's fundamental to me being successful? So for example, in my business, I have to be comfortable getting on stage and giving talks and giving webinars. As a child, I was so shy, I didn't open my mouth in front of anybody I knew. As I moved through high school and college, and I started realizing that I wanted to be able to communicate what was important to me and the work I was doing, I knew I had to get comfortable being on stage. I knew I had to learn to deal with the extreme anxiety I had at the idea of standing up in front of people and being judged on how I looked, what I said, what my slides looked like, what people would think of me, what they would think of my accent, what they would think of fill in the blank, right? But I realized that my bigger goal was more important and I had to get over that. So I intentionally took on multiple teaching experiences where I had to stand up in front of rooms 40, 50, 60, 100 people 2 to 4 to 6 times a week so that I could get over it. Because I knew the only way that I was going to manage to get to the place that I wanted to in my life was to change my mental habits, to change my mindset around that. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so in summary, when we look over all this, right? Pre-corona, BC, as I called it, things were not great. Right, I love this. So I'm seeing some questions here. Let me just have a quick look at these. What's a good meal for the end of the day? So a good meal for the end of the day is something that your body will digest easily. So that would be plant-based. So, you know, black beans and rice, a big salad, soup. You want to eat with the seasons and you want to eat with the time of year, right? So if it's really cold outside, you don't want to be eating an icy cold salad. Now that it's spring and summer here in Cleveland, yay, the sun's shining. It's now time to have salads, right? So eat light, easily digestible food at the end of the day. Yep, yoga and walking is helping shift the pounds. A standing desk is great. You can also get these things to put under a desk where your feet can move too. So that's another great way. Standing desks are fabulous. And then we have here, it feels like we should put a 10-minute me time or lunchtime private meeting on our calendar. That's exactly one of the things I get my clients to do is I say, put times on the calendar that you block off that your assistant can't touch and that you treat the appointments with yourself as important and with as much priority and as much love and as much commitment as you show up for the other meetings in your life, for the other people in your life. You know, you can think of yourself as a lighthouse. If you don't keep the fire stoked of your lighthouse, all the ships that are navigating around you, which you can think of as those roles that you take on, or the relationships that you take on, are going to crash at your shores. When I think about self-care in that way, when I think about looking after my sleep, looking after my mental health, looking after my eating, looking after my exercising, looking after the things that I know nourish me as a mother, as a daughter, as a business owner, as a friend, I'm reminded of how important it is because I can then show up for those people and light the way for them as much as I possibly can. Okay, so in summary, things were not great before. So what can we learn from that? What I want you to do is evaluate, take data, examine, evaluate, right? How am I dealing with my boundaries? Am I saying, yes, I'll get on that meeting, but I've also got to log my child into Google Classroom and navigate a 2-year-old who's having a meltdown and my husband or is, you know, in a meeting and I don't have a partner and, right? Am I being clear about my boundaries? Am I making clear spaces for me to do these different things? Because there's energy everywhere. We want to be as chunked and as clear about these roles we have and how we're then moving between them. Have I created a clear transition ritual? One of the ones that I get all of my clients to do on a Friday afternoon is to create a list of the holy bleep, I'm awesome list, where you look at everything you've achieved because our brains are designed to look for the negative. Our brains are designed to focus on what's not working, which is a safety mechanism. It's amazing. It's the evolution. Look at what is working. Add that up. Celebrate yourself. Are you taking enough breaks, right? We work incredibly hard, most of us, way harder in the US than any other European countries. Like France has mandated a 37.5-hour week. In Germany, organizations that are over 50 people are not allowed to email people after 6 p.m. on a workday, right? We can create this too if we are intentional about it. And then look at how you're setting up your day. Are you starting and ending your day on your terms? Are you sleeping, eating, and exercising? And are you working on your mental habits? Thank you guys so much. Is sitting too much? Yeah, sitting too much is a bad thing, right? Your kitchen is now your office. The best way to separate. So create an area of your kitchen that is your office, and that when you are in your office, don't do anything else, right? You can also create a ritual like lighting a candle, putting on a particular song, putting on noise canceling headphones, creating some kind of system around it. Smells, sounds, touch, things that create that energy. Does that make sense? Sitting too much, it does create back and leg pain. Exactly. So you need to get up and move. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. You can feel free to reach out to me, tamsin@tamsinasa.com, if you have any questions that I wasn't clear about. And I so appreciate you taking the time and energy to show up today for me. Thank you so much. Thank you, Geraldine.
Well, thank you, Tamsin. On behalf of everyone at Corporate College, not just me, and our Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses, we want to thank you, Tamsin, for being here today and really sharing this. I have a lot of LT and Ds, and I really got to change my mindset because some of those T's I can't get rid of. So. Anyway, real quick, and Tamsin again is connected through our Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, and that's a program held in partnership with Tri-C. It is a classroom-based practical business education program that gives small business owners several benefits, including valuable skills for growing their business, opportunities for access to financial capital, and powerful networking opportunities, all and especially important at no cost to participants. The curriculum includes one-on-one advice and clinics, workshops, all administered by subject matter experts. And participants learn to identify and evaluate opportunities, understand financial statements, hire, retrain, and lead employees, negotiate successfully, and create a comprehensive growth plan, among other business courses. And the best part is we are currently accepting applications. The deadline, though, is June 4th. So if you are interested, please visit our Tri-C website at tri-c.edu/10KSB for more information, or contact Heidi Selzner. You can reach her at 216-987-3162. Again, thank you so much, Tamsin, for being here today. Thank you, all of you, and we look forward to presenting you more educational free webinars, and please check out our free webinar series page for more information. So stay safe, healthy, and ready to take on all these new challenges. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.